One of my favorite things about what I do here at The Arcanist is that I get to talk with a bunch of cool people who actually do things in the industry. A couple weeks ago, I got to talk with Charles Tyra, editor-in-chief of Goblins Galaxies and Cosmic Horror Monthly. Hi everyone, I'm James, an author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. Goblins Galaxies is genuinely one of my favorite Sword and Sorcery magazines out on the market today. They're rather new to the community, but they just funded on Kickstarter their second year of magazines. They're a quarterly magazine, so one is coming out every 3 months, and the next 4 are ready to go, with submissions opening up in May. So if you are a Sword and Sorcery writer and you're hoping to learn how to get a leg up while submitting to magazines like Goblins Galaxies and similar pulp magazines, I highly recommend you stick around and hear what Charles has to say about what he looks for in the submissions. But before we begin, I wanted to let you know that Goblins Galaxies is still running on Kickstarter, and they've just entered their final days. This is but another example of excellent Sword and Sorcery publications just killing it in the indie market. Readers want this. They want action and adventure. They want Sword and Sorcery to come back. So let's help them finish strong. While you're taking a look at crowdfunding campaigns, go ahead and follow the Literary Fantasy magazine on BackerKit. We're going to be launching in the summer, and there's going to be plenty of options for people who have subscribed in the past and people who are new to the publication as a whole. All right, that's enough of all that. Let's get to the talk. Hey everybody, I'm here with Charles Tyra, editor of Goblins Galaxies, and I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I'm just going to let him describe who he is to you.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I'm the editor and publisher of Goblins Galaxies magazine. It's still pretty new. It launched last year through Kickstarter and did fairly well, and so this is kind of like the renewal, where with the campaign running right now is for the second year. It's a quarterly magazine, so it's going to be the second year's issues 5 through 8. But before that, I edited and published Cosmic Horror Monthly for about 5 or 6 years. And so that's really where I started out, and this is the second branching off of that.
So Goblins Galaxies is science fiction, sword and sorcery. Is there like a special brand of sci-fi? I'm pretty familiar with the sword and sorcery end, but what's your guys' specialty? What are you doing a little different than everyone else?
Yeah, I do feel like everyone kind of has their own flavor for this kind of thing. My idea for what we're putting together is to have traditional sword and sorcery and then try to have dark fantasy and science fiction that incorporates some of the elements of sword and sorcery, primarily like having lots of action and a sense of adventure if we're going to pick up a dark fantasy or a science fiction story.
So a big part of my audience are sword and sorcery authors trying to find their start. They're seeing all these cool magazines coming up and they're looking to break in. What advice would you have for an author who wants to submit to Goblins Galaxies or another similar magazine? What are you looking for?
Even though we like to kind of like pay homage to the classics, and I'm a huge fan of the stuff that was going on like 100 to 80 years ago, we like to kind of have stuff that is in a similar vein but utilizes modern storytelling. And then like beyond that, it really is about, like for Goblins Galaxies, capturing that sense of adventure within the story, regardless of the subject matter that they choose, and having it be very action oriented. Even though we are calling out sword and sorcery, things like that, avoiding cliches and like tropes is definitely helpful too.
When you say modern storytelling, what do you mean by that?
So like I said, even though I'm a fan of it, a lot of the old, pulp stories, I would say that it's kind of like not necessarily purple, but like the prose and the language would be real elaborate and kind of flowery. And I typically look for saying the saying as much as you can in as few words as you can.
What do you want from the sci-fi end of things? What is compelling to you as far as like subject matter, or I'm assuming you also want that clean, concise prose on that end of things as well.
Yeah, I would say that typically is something I look for across the board. It's hard to say, like looking for specific types of stories. I would lean more towards speculative than like hard science fiction, for what we're going for, and stories that manage to like combine these subgenres. What like I'm really looking like really interested to read stories that do that like well, that do it creatively. I mean, I do kind of feel like the most obvious combination of the two is steampunk, and I haven't published too much of that. But I mean, you can take like, you know, lots of like, the basics of sword and sorcery, like combat, magic, weaponry, heroes, and I feel like you can put that into a futuristic setting as well, and it still works.
You have experience, you said, about 6 years doing Cosmic Horror Monthly.
Yep.
Tell me about that. What was that like? Was that your venture, or did you get hired on by someone else to do that?
Yeah, that was my first venture that I took on by myself initially. It evolved over the course of a couple of years, starting as blogging about cosmic horror in some way, to producing a print magazine when I felt that there weren't too many options for that available. And it really came down to cosmic horror being like my first love in the like fiction world. I grew up reading that kind of stuff, like H.P. Lovecraft, plus the handful of other writers that did it well at the time. And so that's really where it started.
So are you still editing Cosmic Horror Monthly, or have you passed it on to focus on Goblins and Galaxies?
I edited that one for the first couple of years, and then it started to grow, and I brought on some more people to help out with that, including Jolie Tumagen, who's a really good editor. She started out, we did an anthology, and that went super well, and so I invited her to be the editor of that magazine. Roughly a year before I decided to kind of branch off and do Goblins and Galaxies.
What are your goals for Goblins and Galaxies? Are you just wanting to maintain the quarterly thing, or do you have your eyes set on some bigger prize down the line?
Yeah, I think about this from time to time, and what I would like this magazine and both magazines to look like 5 or 10 years down the road. I mean, I'd love for them to still be going, obviously. They kind of are a split of what I feel like Weird Tales did really well, which was a combination of fantasy and horror and weird fiction. But I don't have any plans to like converge them. I would like to keep them both going separately. In terms of having more frequency, it kind of just depends on bandwidth. If the magazine stays alive and does well for a while, I would love to do more often than quarterly, but I do foresee sticking to quarterly for at least a couple more years.
Yeah, and the quarterly model is already pretty tough. I mean, most magazines aren't doing that. Every now and then I see a monthly magazine, like Cosmic Horror Monthly is doing it, and then there's a few others in the pulp realm of things. I can't even imagine trying to keep my head on straight with all of that. How do you keep your head on straight? Doing a quarterly magazine, or I'm assuming you're doing some level of submission reading, if not at like the end of the train, then somewhere further down the line. Walk me through your process.
Yeah, it might be a little different than some others because submission reading is one of my favorite things. It's like I didn't really realize that when I started, but reading slush is something I love doing even still. So I try to help out with that as much as possible. We usually split that into 2 rounds, and then the second round is more heavily myself, and in the case of CHM, Jolie, and then for Goblins and Galaxies, we do have some slush readers helping us out, and then like for a second round of final decisions, that's all me.
Do you have a day job on top of the publishing that you have to balance?
I do. Fortunately, I'm in software, so I have a work from home situation, so I'm able to save at least the time that I'd be commuting to an office, where I can kind of just like switch between things and get some things done in the morning and in the evening. I mean, it helps to have some systems in place, like definitely wouldn't have been able to start out with 2 magazines, but I learned a lot for the first couple of years of doing CHM, and was able to slowly streamline some things and get kind of like a system going that I can rely on. And so that helps to not get burned out.
Right. Right. Yeah. So with the magazines, so I'm assuming the whole publishing practice, that's your baby. And then you have the magazines that are their own imprints. So is it something that you'd want to do full time if you had the opportunity? Or are you pretty happy, splitting your time between your day job and publishing on the side?
Yeah, I'm lucky to have a day job that I don't hate. And so it works well splitting it right now, but it is kind of like the dream. I would love to do publishing full time. And I don't know, I guess the second magazine in some way is kind of a way to try to expand and maybe get closer to that goal, but it could take a while.
Yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings on that because I like my day job too. It's not easy all the time to balance everything, but I have a pretty good regiment of waking up early and taking care of things. And also I have a lot of free time at work. Often I have my computer with me all the time, which helps. So
Nice, that does help.
yeah, I always have my head in two places. And I would like to, I feel like I would like being full-time as a publisher or, focusing on doing stuff like that. But then I really admire the variety I get, going into the office, doing something that isn't writing related for a while. And then I can come back and I don't know, it generates longing, right? It makes me miss the fun part of what I do on the daily. The work-life balance, like do you wake up early? Do you have time because you're in software, you're able to kind of pop on and look at things? How do you split up those two roles?
Yeah, that's another good question. Kind of like you were saying, fortunately, I'm a morning person. So I get up pretty early, just kind of naturally, and I'll get some coffee and just like sit at my desk right away and try to knock out 2 or 3 hours of publishing stuff before I start doing software.
Nice. Yeah, you're probably the first person I've met that has agreed with me on the morning person thing.
I don't know very many others.
It's an unpopular stance, but it's so liberating, right? You waking up. I wake up around between 3:30 and 4:30, which the last few weeks, I don't know, my body's just been telling me no. I've been sleeping in almost every day. I'm chronically
early
behind
for me
now.
is 6, so.
Oh, hey, still. I tell people all the time I'm crazy. I just
teach their own.
Yeah, but I like the before sunrise hours because I used to be, when I was in high school and my early 20s, I was a huge all-nighter person. I just never went to sleep. As a kid, staying up late was kind of my only time I had to myself. It was the only freedom I had. So I find that waking up that early has the same appeal as staying up late, but except I get to drink coffee guilt-free, and then I feel good when I go to work most of the time.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. So is there any writing of your own on top of publishing other people's writing?
Yeah, that's one of those things where when I started out, it was kind of a side-by-side with my own writing goals and interests, and it kind of turned out that I enjoyed the process of running the first magazine, doing the editing, doing all the things that are needed for publishing, that I kind of put writing aside, and I haven't really done too much of that. I plan to get back to it though.
Right. So your enjoyment's coming more from working with other people and getting these products out.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of that? Is it, when I'm working with, I really love finding new talent, people who didn't have a whole lot of confidence, or like it might be one of their first publications. And then I'll often, something that the Arcanist does, I feel like a lot of publishers don't, is that personal touch that, hey, I'm the actual person who does this, and I'm going to edit your story. I'm going to explain to you why I'm making the suggestions that I am. And I often get really positive feedback from that, because the writers that really care will actually pay attention, and they'll learn something, and then they come back, and I can tell that they've gotten better. So that's always just such a vindicating moment. I mean, do you have anything like that when you're working with authors, where it just warms your heart to see them come back or see them improve?
You don't really think, especially starting out, that you're going to be working with some of these writers a lot. Like you get a lot of the same people submitting, because a lot of writers, they'll stick to one as a subgenre or a genre. So you get to read a lot of their stuff, and it's fun to see someone's writing evolve. And so I would say my favorite is, especially if I've published a few short stories and like you see someone's kind of career coming along and they're coming out with an anthology, that's always really cool. I can think of a couple where a person's first short story was with me, and that's kind of a proud moment to see them come that far.
When I first started, I had a writer write me back. Because when you just open your doors, nobody knows your name. Nobody, you're wondering what's all the other publishers are doing to where they have way too much. Because I get 10 submissions a month, and I remember. So I would be quick to jump on things that I really liked in those first 6 months or so that I was open. And I remember somebody saying to me, "This is the quickest acceptance I've ever got. And this has made my day." And I'm like, that's really cool, because that's not how it is anymore.
Yeah. Yep. It was exactly the same. That first open call, I don't remember exactly how many, but it was kind of going through, reading them. And then if I loved something, it was like, okay, I got to get this before somebody else gets it. It's just trying to get the best stories that you can. And so, yeah, like a couple more submission periods later, and then it's, hundreds of submissions. You got to read all of them so you don't miss out on something. And then it becomes a balancing act.
Yeah, I find that when I'm submission reading, so you like submission reading. I like it sometimes. I like it when it's good. So often we have a whole volunteer team of submission readers. They do all the slush, and then they pass it up to my managing editor, who does the second stage. He's a lot pickier than I am. So then he will curate among those acceptances, and then I get a much reduced list. And I sometimes will go and do the lower level, like the lower tier readings as well, and then I pass it up like anyone else would, because my emotions drive me when I really enjoy something. Because sometimes you really enjoy a story, but then it's just not really like the technical aspect of the writing is pretty lackluster, and that could lead to a lot of labor in editorial. That's all to say. So I pass it up the line just like anyone else. But when I get something, I find I've started really paying attention to my moods, because if I'm reading something that nobody else has touched, I find that if I'm in a bad mood or I'm tired, I'm going to be a lot ruder about it. So I try to recognize that, and I will put it aside and say I need to just come back to this, because I'm being kind of unfair in this moment. Do you ever have situations like that where you can kind of feel like whatever is going on in your life is maybe affecting your judgment as far as it being an editor, or the other way around, like you're in a really good mood and maybe you say you yes preemptively to a bunch of things and have to pare it back?
Sometimes it's hard to tell, because you will read 4 good stories in a row, and it's like, oh my God, do I have any idea what I'm doing?
Yeah.
They just happen to be there, whatever order you're going through them. But I have come across that where I have noticed, I'm not in the right mindset for this. And so I've come to the point where I have to really schedule my time and decide when to do certain tasks. And so I try to do slush reading early in the morning, where I'm kind of fresh for the day. Also, even though it's early, it's easier for me to focus rather than in the afternoon or the evening. So that's kind of how it works for me.
Yeah, reading in the morning, I think, is typically a good decision. Your brain is more primed to accept new information and for focus. And I know if I'm going to be in a bad mood, it'll be after 3 p.m. typically.
I mean, exactly.
Okay, so in submissions, what are your pet peeves? What are the things that people just keep doing? And you're like, why? Why? I put it in the guidelines. Why do you keep doing this? Do you have any of those that keep coming up?
Yeah, it's really one. Whenever the manuscript starts with the first word of the story, no title, no byline. That bothers me. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean the story's going to be bad. I just really would like to read the title and the byline before I start reading the story.
We work from a Google sheet that automatically populates with the form, and I just put like a long paragraph answer for cover letter, and I have since turned that into short paragraph.
Yeah.
Because it was fine for a while with like our normal rotation, the people who submit to us all the time, but then we got featured on a blog. I've never heard of it before, but apparently a lot of people read it because suddenly there was like 300 submissions out of nowhere, and I couldn't, a non-zero amount, more than one, just copied their entire CV from like 1975 onward.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just like, dude, I'm not gonna read that. I gotta read your story. You want me to read your CV instead? Yeah. So how do you feel about cover letters? Just out of curiosity, like I get a little mixed feelings on them. I feel like they can make me a little biased. Like I almost want to root for somebody when I read something in their cover letter. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Actually, what I typically do is read the cover letter after I read the story. Because I have found some similar things with myself. I don't want to like prejudge. I also don't. I used to ask for, hey, send me a quick summary of what your story's about. But like since I'm not publishing novels, it doesn't really do me as much good. I'd rather just read the short story because it might turn out that the person's not good at writing a query or a summary, but their short story is great. So especially, it's only up to 6,000 words. So I typically try to just read that first, and then I'll go back and see what they happen to put there, if any information is interesting or relevant.
Yeah, and a lot of writers are unfortunately pretty bad with, concise summary writing. You ask somebody, hey, pitch me your novel in one sentence. That's the perfect way to get someone to freeze up. Yeah, I've been that guy before. My first time at a conference, my first year of college, and there was this, I can't remember what his name was, but he was like this surfer bro guy a professor from Arizona State. And I swear, I don't know if he was, but I swear he was wearing swim trunks. It was in Florida, so he might have been. He's like, yeah, so what's your book about? And I just remember, I can't tell you what I said, but I remember his eyes glazing over and just like his face falling and he's not listening.
Yeah.
Too many sentences. Also, that book wasn't very good, and I think this experienced individual was able to see that just from listening to me talk about it.
I have been there. Before I was doing this, I wrote a novel, and I had no idea how to write a pitch or a query, and so it wasn't traditionally published. But it's a different skill, and it kind of makes sense with reading 80,000 words is a risk and a time investment. So you want to have an idea of what you're going to get versus, a short story, I can get through that in probably the average short story in about 10 or 15 minutes.
6,000 words, 4,000 to 6,000 words, correct? Or is it a little bit less?
Open to a little less. Try not to go over 6,000 though.
Okay. So what's your methodology there? Because I see word counts all over the place, and I've always been pretty lenient about it. And then I'm planning an anthology next year with my managing editor, and usually we're 10,000 for the general submissions, and he tells me 4,000 to 8,000 I'm not budging. And I'm like, okay, all right. So what's your thought there? Up to 6,000. Why that number specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of just over the past several years of doing this, of reading and getting a grasp of what the pace is like at each thousand. There's no hard rule for that, of course. You can have an 8,000 word story that is super fast paced, but I wouldn't say that's typical. And so I kind of have found that stories over 6,000 don't move at the pace that I would like for what I'm trying to do with Goblins and Galaxies. And so have stuck to just sticking below that, and it's worked out so far.
Nice. And I imagine it makes your job a little easier with the reading. You know that you
It
always
does.
going to be within a pretty consistent range.
Yeah. And then it helps to be able to plan. I like to have a certain number, or at least be able to plan how I'm going to, like where I'm going to put each story, how many stories for each magazine. It's easier to plan that way when I know I don't have to work with, an 11,000 word story somewhere.
Yeah, I've run into that in planning my 2026 issues. The December issue is the longest one, but it has the least amount of stuff in it. I want to put more in there, but every page is money. So
Yeah.
Okay, tell me how you're distributing. Are you doing print on demand? Are you doing traditional printing?
That's something that's kind of evolved over time, but like for this project, it's traditional printing. I have a printer I work with locally in the city where I live that does a good job, and so I'll try to have an idea of how many issues I need. Going through Kickstarter makes that pretty easy,
Yeah.
and I can order the exact number, and then I ship those out.
Is there like a minimum that you have to work with that printer?
I haven't really had to mess with that since I found them when CHM was pretty far along. And with the last Kickstarter, we launched at, I can't remember the exact number, but it was more than or around 150 print subscribers. And so the higher the number, the lower the cost per book, of course, but like there wasn't any issues with the initial print run there.
Okay, 150. I've always heard around 250 is a benchmark, so it's interesting that you're able to do 150. I'll have to look into some local printers then, see if I can get that to fly.
It makes a huge difference. Like as a publisher, I have used some of the I don't know what you would call it, like a national printer. Like it was in another state. Like the cost kept going up every month, and like the quality was decent, but it was like every month significant hikes in the price, and papers would become available. Of course, I mean some of that is launching a magazine. In the years post COVID, is how do you plan for that anyway? But like the switch to the local printer is one of those things I wish I had known about and done sooner.
I work with a company called Book Vault for most of my print on demand. And I'm getting to this point now where it's not making much more sense in the next year. We just did a backer kit campaign a couple months ago. Yeah, last month. And I'm just at that threshold where I'm like, I really should be getting this offset printed because it would be a lot more affordable. And I always get a little bit concerned about space because I just actually last month went to a 5x10 climate controlled storage unit. Before that, it was on my basement landing, just stacked up in boxes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Book Vault is great. I highly recommend them to anybody watching who's looking into print on demand. What I like is that it's no nonsense. You put in your ISBN number. If you are a patron of one of their partners or whatever, they have promo codes where you don't pay anything for a listing fee, and then you just order your book. You don't have to actually publish it. Heck, you don't even really need the ISBN. I had a friend who just put together an anthology of short stories his D&D group made, and he made 6 copies and sent them to his friends in hardcover with all their fancy things that they do, and their hardcovers look amazing. I mean, they do a really excellent job for print on demand, but Yeah, I'll have to look into local printers because it's still expensive on a per copy basis to do it that way.
It is. That's kind of the issue with print on demand. I do have some experience with Book Vault. I feel like they're great, especially for shipping internationally.
Oh yeah.
Because if you're going to print, if you're in the States and you're trying to ship across overseas, it's hellaciously expensive. And then Book Vault really helps with that.
Yeah, Book Vault. I love you just put in the address and they tell you what it'll cost. I'm still trying to decode the whole, eldritch language of shipping across overseas and giving people estimates on that. On my direct sales website, I'm always having to update the shipping because I'm like, oh, I got an order in this country. Okay, let's see how that worked out. Oh, I'm barely breaking even. We got to raise that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty much been the driving force for all of the price increases I've had to do over the past 6 years.
Yeah, and magazines now, they're not a cheap thing the way they might have been, 50 years ago.
Right.
They're almost like a luxury item. I mean, would you agree with that?
I definitely would. Although it's an interesting point because I do feel like there's at least a section of the reading population that has like going back the other way. First everything was digital and digital was the coolest thing, but I kind of feel like there's a section of people that are kind of rebelling against the digital age, going against social media, and going against everything being on a screen. And so it's kind of nice to see. I'm one of those people. I like to hold a book in my hand. That's part of why I have insisted on offering print the whole time.
There really is something special about a print copy in your book. I'm split between the two. I mean, I'm definitely with you ideologically on detethering from screens and going back to a print medium. But then I'm also always thinking about like with the Arcanist, I'm always trying to do things in an environmentally friendly way.
Right.
So eventually I want to I have to do bubble mailers right now because I'm just on such a tight budget. And then I'm looking at all this plastic in there. I'm like, oh God, I want to move over to more like recycled, environmentally friendly packaging materials that will safely send books, hopefully. That's another thing I'm worried about is bubble mailers. At least I know the stuff will get there right. But so I think about like the paper, the clippings and the things like that. And the way I distribute ebooks is I always give people DRM free. They can download the files. I still need to kind of strengthen my internal infrastructure on my website so that this stuff gets automatically delivered. But ideally, I want, if you buy a paper book, you also get the EPUB and the PDF. Because why not? Why do you have to buy those things 3 separate times? It's ridiculous. I just heard a podcast. Somebody said you could buy the EPUB, the print, or the PDF. I'm like, you have to choose between the 2 different digital files? What? That's insane.
Yeah. I've always offered those together. That's kind of been just like a basic thing for us.
Yeah.
I do agree with you. I think that, like the print typically is the flagship. I mean, I feel like if you chip in for a print, you should get digital. So we've started doing that as well because I haven't always done that, not necessarily on purpose.
Yeah, and it helps massage the way that like books are priced now because books are more expensive. Making books is more expensive. Just shipping things is more expensive. And I don't really see this getting better as far as like as time goes on. So like what I've seen around like with the death of the mass market paperback, it's being replaced by ebooks. So, I like offering the digital option for people who really need it financially. As far as I'm concerned, if anybody asks me, I will just give them whatever they're hoping to read because, I just want them to read it. I don't really care. Other people might feel differently, but, so that digital only is the budget option. It takes the place of what paperbacks used to be. And now paperbacks are kind of more the the standard. And in the case of magazines, they are kind of premium. They have art. They tend to be bigger or smaller. Something that sets my magazines apart is that they're pocket sized, because I spent a lot of time on the bus last year, and I'm just lugging around these big books, and I'm wishing, like, man, I wish I had something that I could fit in my pocket.
That makes sense.
Doing a little bit different, that is bringing the magazine into our current year, because it's a different landscape than it ever used to be. We have to approach these things differently.
So the point I was just making is, my feelings towards print. I'm a big advocate, and while also trying to stay conscious of, taking care of the environment. But we do prioritize our digital publications as well. And I'm working on reworking our mobile app, which is supposed to make reading the magazines digitally extremely easy. And this year, the mobile app will include Goblins Galaxies.
Oh, I really
Initially,
like that.
it was dedicated to Cosmic Horror Monthly. And it's an application. Once it's on your phone, you get instant access to all of the back issues that have been published. And so a couple months from now, rough timeline, when we're able to re-release the mobile app, fixing a lot of issues it used to have, it's also going to include Goblins and Galaxies for reading.
Oh, that's awesome. So, okay, tell me more about this mobile app. I didn't know that was a thing. Is that available for anybody to download? Or you said relaunch, so is it gone for right now?
It's gone for right now. We had some issues with, there's a rule with Android apps that you have to, push updates to them every so often, or it looks like you're not doing anything, even if your app is fully functional and it shuts down. So we have had to kind of start from scratch there. The original app had some issues anyway, and so went ahead and rebuilt the whole thing. The EPUB reader works a lot better than it used to. And yeah, so in addition to reading CHM, we're going to have a section for reading Goblins and Galaxies, and then also old public domain pulp magazines.
Okay. Oh, man, this keeps getting better. Okay, so is this like for subscribers, or like you download it and then you kind of get access to it in some other way? How do you plan on people using it?
That's a good question. So both magazines have a free version. I've always called it the light version of each magazine, because each issue has roughly 7 to 9 stories, and so the light version will have like 4. So that's what you can get as a sample each month or each quarter to read. And so by default, once the app is available, it's not quite ready yet, but once it's available, you'd install it and you'd have access to all of those half-sized magazines. And then there's the option to subscribe, or if you're already subscribed, you'd have the premium access.
I try to kind of use like QR codes in the back of my magazines where people can claim whatever digital reward comes with the book. How are you planning on dishing out that premium access? Like, would it be a similar thing, like you bought the paper book so you have a code in the back, or is it an email, something simpler like that?
Well, this is one of those things, because of my background in software, and I've had to wire up a lot of stuff myself. So I track all of the subscribers, and the mobile app is linked to a database. So if someone has subscribed through any of the channels that are available, the application will know about it.
Nice. Yeah, so I'm not a software developer, but I work in IT, so I think this is fascinating. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm very excited about it.
So I assume that links up like with your website and everything. You hand coded that and have that all strung together.
No, unfortunately, I didn't. Like, hand coding a website was on the to-do list, but with what you can do with WordPress, it's almost like no need to reinvent the wheel. So our website is a little more kind of traditional. It wasn't written from scratch, but a lot of the processing, the distribution for digital magazines, it's all wired together with stuff that I've had to do because PayPal doesn't fit nicely with everything.
Yeah. Okay, so you didn't color in the site, but you put all the wires together underneath it.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yep.
Yeah, I learned how to do WordPress in a very weird way. I picked it up from a web designer who was working in my day job, and kind of paired it with I took one HTML, CSS, JavaScript class in college as an elective, and so I don't know. I don't think this is how people are supposed to do it, but I make everything from scratch, and then I convert it to a PHP format, and then I name it as a template, and I just make my own theme on WordPress, and I add the template on there. It feels really messy, but then it just works, so I just keep going with it. I don't know. Does that sound like a totally crazy thing to do, or?
It doesn't. So I guess you reminded me the reason why I didn't write my website from scratch. Like when I was going to school, I learned about PHP, which is what it was used to develop WordPress, and I just don't like it very much. My day job is very different languages than that, and so there's not a lot of crossover. But I know a handful of people that are able to do that, and they're able to kind of do a lot of custom stuff within WordPress, and they contribute plugins, and I think that's really cool. But unfortunately, I've never delved into that myself.
Yeah, beyond that, WordPress is kind of an eldritch language to me because it's just
It is
draconian. I hate PHP too. I mean I understand the HTML side of things. I can do that by memory most of the time. But then when I get to the WordPress integration, it's like all vibe coding. I'm just like, I'm not a coder, I'm a writer. I'm just gonna I need it to work.
right.
And then it's like every other day I get a comment on YouTube, hey, this thing on your website's broken, and I'm like, how is it, where are these things? But that's also a great thing that people will just let you know that, because that's free QA right there.
Yeah, and it certainly helps to know HTML when you're in publishing, because for those that don't know, that's what an EPUB is. And so you have a little problem, it's a lot easier to look at and figure out what the problem is if you know what you're looking at.
Hey, thanks, Charles, for taking the time to talk with me. I forgot to mention it to you, but I'm a happy backer of the campaign, so good luck.
I appreciate that very much.
Have you funded yet?
Actually, earlier today, it crossed 100%. So that was great. Hopefully it's just kind of coasting along and gets some of our stretch goals.
Well, how can we find you and Goblins and Galaxies? What are the plugs?
Goblinsandgalaxies.com. We'll have all the links to everything we have going on, particularly the Kickstarter, right on the front page. That's how I would find us.
All right, yeah, that's a good tip. So go check it out, folks. Goblins and Galaxies on Kickstarter. They just funded, so you're getting your magazines. Go for it. I'd highly encourage you to do it.